I have a 78 brake horsepower vehicle.
I'm actually bricking it now.
He's crashed. Oh.
No!
Oh, come on, come on, come on.
Doug's coming back. No!
Have you just put a turbocharger on it or something?
Small, cheap, petrol-powered cars are dying.
And it does seem like cars are getting bigger, heavier, and more expensive.
But there are still some very good, relatively cheap options out there.
The best of them are fun to drive, easy to park, and very cheap to run.
In this review, we're putting the Fiat 500 up against the Hyundai i10 and the new Kia Picanto.
We're driving them in the city down one of the narrowest roads in London. We're going to compare their interiors and we're even going to drag race them. Then at the end of this video, we'll crunch all of the numbers to find out exactly how much each of our cars costs. And finally, we'll pick a winner.
So Will, what are we driving and where are we going?
Well, you are in the brand new Kia Picanto. I'm in the fairly new Hyundai i10 and Neil is in the ancient Fiat 500. And we're hopefully going to show that some of the smallest and the cheapest new cars that you can buy are very impressive and thoroughly recommendable, particularly if you're driving in town. So the first thing we're going to do is drive them down the narrowest street we can find. Okay, so this road is just 6 foot 6 inches wide. Clearly you're not going to fit a Range Rover down here, but in theory, our three cars should all fit down here. But can they? We're going to find out by starting with the narrowest. Do you think you'll be okay?
Yeah. Well, I hope he's okay, because my car's wider.
Okay, so I am 1,595 millimeters wide. This should be fine, but it's still rather scary.
It's going a bit slowly, too slowly.
Very slowly, very slowly.
And at the top of this road, it does look like it gets a lot narrower on the way down.
Right hand side.
He is quite far. He does need a bit of correction. Shall I say?
Neil's pointing furiously at me.
That way?
But I think he's just trying to cause
He's gonna
me to crash.
Has he done it?
Yeah, he's done it.
You directed me into a bollard.
Did you hit the bollard? GoPro.
Oh!
Now, my car isn't actually much wider than Doug's at 1,627 millimeters wide, but it feels the widest, which psychologically is worrying me, and I'm on the lowest profile tyres, so I have quite a good chance of curbing these if I don't get it right.
Okay, Neil next. He's a bit wider than the Picanto.
Right, so my technique is going to be to not look at Will and Doug, because they're definitely going to try and direct me into the curb.
Oh, he's quite close.
Oh dear.
This is surprisingly tight.
He's zigzagging quite a lot.
I'm not looking at them, they're trying to direct me, but I'm just keeping my eye on the curbs.
Oh,
Okay.
I think he's going to do
He's
it.
just made that, hasn't he?
Well done. Well done, Neil.
Easy.
Okay, this does look a bit narrower now. I'm actually here, but surely that's wide enough.
So Will is the widest. Oh, that's quite tight.
Okay, here we go.
But I did
right.
notice he's got the biggest, tallest sidewalls.
We've got plenty of space. Plenty of space here.
Did he just clip the camera?
I'm not sure. There goes another GoPro.
Oh, he's got it now. Once you get to
Looks
here,
okay.
it's fine.
There we go. Easy. Easy.
Done.
Well done.
Success all round.
So we got all three through with no damage.
Easy.
Okay, so at the moment I am doing 8 miles an hour and now 0 miles an hour. So this is London for you. We've been stop-start the whole way through. So far we have been driving for just over an hour and 20 minutes and we've done 13.2 miles, so averaging well under 10 miles an hour. But really, this is the type of environment these cars should be ideally suited to. At the moment, fuel economy, not spectacular according to the trip computer. I'm averaging 37 mpg.
So while we drive to our next destination, I thought I would walk you through some things I like and dislike about the 500 in the city. And the first thing that I really like is visibility, because you sit quite high up for what is a super mini. And I suspect because this car was developed in the mid-noughties, you've also got quite thin pillars, probably not great for safety, but really good for visibility. And it gives you this kind of greenhouse effect, so you can see all around you very easily. When you pair that as well with a very short front and rear overhang, this is an absolute breeze to park. There are other things about the 500 that are a bit of a mixed bag. For example, the gear stick. Now, it's mounted nice and high, almost on a plinth, which means it folds really easily to hand, which I love. In fact, it reminds me of an old Honda Civic Type R. However, the gear change itself is really lumpy, and this gearbox is starting to feel its age. And one thing you do around town is change gear a lot, so that's not very pleasant.
Now, you may have noticed that Fiat has announced a new petrol-powered 500 for next year. That means you can no longer place a factory order for this 500. But there are loads still available to buy, and it will be on sale until the end of the year.
You know what? This i10 is really impressive to drive around town. That's partly because of its compact dimensions, but also because it's very easy to see out of, lots of glass, not too chunky windscreen pillars. But also, the drivability of this car is very good. It has a 1.2 litre engine. It's perhaps a little bit flat at very low revs. It's not turbocharged, of course. But other than that, it's very smooth. The brakes are predictable. They're not grabby. The clutch action's progressive. And even the gearbox, you might think, well, it's a manual gearbox, so it's going to be a real pain to drive around town. You've got to stir away at this gear lever down here. But it's actually quite pleasant to use. So overall, as I say, really, really impressive. And it does make you wonder, why do so many people buy a big SUV, particularly when most of their driving is done around town?
So the traffic is terrible, but this Kia Picanto is really great to drive around town. It's got light, responsive steering. I also know exactly how big this car is because the visibility is excellent all round. And this manual gearbox is light, easy to use. And generally, this is a nice, simple thing to drive through a city in. We're joining a motorway and I am accelerating, unleashing the full potential of the 62 brake horsepower that I have here.
We're just joining the M1 and I have a mighty 78 brake horsepower. And that is more than the other cars here. So really, I think out on this open road, this car is going to utterly embarrass the other two. Hello, Doug. So what exactly is new about your Picanto?
Well, this is still the third generation car, but it has been heavily updated recently, following another heavy update back in 2020. This time it's got new looks, it's got new equipment levels, it's also got a different engine lineup from before as well. You used to be able to get a 1 litre turbocharged engine in this. That's been dropped. Now your choice is a 1 litre or a 1.2 litre, both of which are naturally aspirated, which is the same as the i10, right?
Well, not exactly, because although our two cars are very closely related, obviously Hyundai, as it now has made clear that it would like to be pronounced in the UK, not Hyundai, as a lot of people have said, are very closely related. And in fact, the i10 and Picanto are effectively the same car underneath. They're built on the same platform. But you can get that 1 litre turbocharged petrol in the i10 still if you go for N-line trim. This car doesn't have that though. This has the mid-level 1.2. It's a 4-cylinder petrol and it produces 78 brake horsepower, which is quite a lot.
That is quite a lot more than the 62 brake horsepower that I've got. But in a test like this, it's more about sensible things like fuel economy, general running costs, and what these cars are like to drive in town.
Well, it is, but don't forget we do have a drag race tomorrow morning.
That is true, which is very important.
So Neil, you're actually in the oldest car here, aren't you?
Well, I'm not actually just in the oldest car. I reckon I'm in one of the most iconic cars on sale today, because this thing can trace its lineage all the way back to the late 1950s. But it was actually 2007 where the 500 got reborn for the modern era, and it's basically been on sale ever since.
And it hasn't really changed much in that time, has it?
No, it's had a few facelifts and updates, but by and large, I'm driving today the same car that was launched nearly 20 years ago.
The i10 also started life in 2007, but it's now on its third generation, whereas I don't really think you could say that the 500 has gone beyond the first generation, certainly not the petrol version, although I can actually see a hybrid badge on the back of your car. So does that mean it's some sort of mini Toyota Prius?
Well, not exactly. This thing actually has a 1 litre mild hybrid, and it's the mildest hybrid that you can possibly get because you can't plug it in to charge the battery, and at no point does it run on just electric power. All it gets is a small battery that basically extends the time that you can use the stop-start system in traffic. Fiat claims that it improves the economy quite a bit, but we're going to have to look at the numbers later to find out.
Okay, well, should we get to the hotel and find out a little bit more about our cars?
Sounds good to me. I'll see you there.
Okay, so we've made it to the hotel. And what were your cars like on the motorway? Because this was actually better than I thought it might be. The ride wasn't too choppy, and it wasn't as noisy as I thought it might be either.
Well, I feel pretty much the same about the Picanto. And this is the least powerful car here. But even this can get up to motorway speeds eventually, and really isn't that bad cruising at those speeds either.
Okay.
What about the 500?
Well, it sounds like you two had quite a nice time. I wasn't as impressed with this on the motorway. It's quite noisy at speed, a lot of wind noise. It doesn't ride that well, it just doesn't really settle down. And while it can get up to motorway speeds, it takes a very long time to do so. So I was more impressed with this in the city than I was on the motorway.
Okay, perhaps that's understandable. These are some of the smallest cars that you can buy, but given how small they are, I think a lot of people might be surprised by how practical this i10 is. Should we have a look? Okay, so we are in the back of the i10 now, and the first thing I should point out is how easy it is to get into, because you get rear doors as standard, so this is a 5-door small car. And this seat in front of me here, you're sitting in it now, but it is set up for my driving position. I'm just over 6 feet tall, and I have knee room to spare, which I think, again, given the size of this car, is pretty impressive. Headroom, not too bad either, although if I do sit back and try and use the headrest, then yes, my head does hit the ceiling, but not too bad at all.
Picanto next?
Let's do it. Okay, so in the back of the Picanto now, and for consistency, I am sitting here again. This seat in front is set up for my driving position, and very clearly I have a lot less knee room. My knees are actually wedged into the back of that seat there. Headroom though is probably pretty similar. Again, if I do try and lean back and use that headrest, then my head does hit the ceiling. But this is a small car, definitely not as good as the i10 though.
But probably better than the 500.
So Will, you don't look very comfortable there.
I'm really not. And the first thing to point out is that getting in the back of this car is more difficult than it is in the other two, because this is a 3-door. You can't get a 5-door version of the 500. The other two get rear doors as standard. And when you get back here, the space, for someone of my size at least, is frankly terrible. As you can see, just to fit, I've had to lean my head over to the side like that. And also this is the worst for knee room as well. My knees are really wedged up against that seat in front. So yeah, not great.
So the 500 is clearly the smallest in the back, and it also has the smallest boot on paper at 185 litres.
Okay.
But it is more usable than that number would suggest. So if you have a look, you'll see there's very little wheel arch intrusion. And while I don't have a height adjustable boot floor, that just means that you have a very deep boot all the time, which I actually quite like. And it gives me plenty of space to fit my carry-on suitcases. So I think we can agree.
Will the boot
3,
close?
And
Will
the boot closes very easily.
Fair enough.
So what about you, Doug?
Well, this has got a far bigger capacity than the 500. In total, I've got 255 litres. However, when it comes to fitting in some suitcases, I can put in 1, 2, and with a bit of force, that should be 3.
Okay.
Just about.
That's a bit of a
Pretty
squeeze.
tight and quite surprising considering the litres suggest this is way bigger than your 500. But what about the i10?
Well, on paper, the i10 actually has a slightly smaller boot than the Picanto, but only by about 3 litres. I tried this earlier though, and I managed to fit in 3 carry-on suitcases. And look, I've even got a bit of room under there for a soft bag or something like that. And as you can see, the boot closes quite easily. The only thing is you don't get a height adjustable boot floor on any version of the i10.
Well, in the Picanto, the entry-level version doesn't get a height adjustable boot floor.
Okay.
But everything else above that, you do get one as standard, which might be counting against the car in this suitcase test, because you have got this taking up a bit of room at the very bottom.
There's always an excuse.
Sure. But this is quite handy to have, isn't it? Because in its highest position here, you remove a bit of the load lip that you have otherwise, and then it also gives you some underfloor storage too.
That is true, you do have quite a big load lip on that.
So, day 2, and we've already done some driving, but what we should do now is take a closer look at these interiors, and we will start in the new Picanto. And let me point out the things that are new for this new model.
Okay.
So, this touchscreen infotainment system is now standard across the lineup, as is this digital driver display, and that's about it. So really, the only new things to point out is the fact that the very, very cheap entry-level trim from before, which had no kit, doesn't exist. So even if you go for a very low-spec, good value Picanto, you get this interior.
It's very nice, isn't it, actually? This isn't soft touch, but the way it's textured, the fact it's got a slightly matte finish, makes it look as though, so it's only when you actually touch it that you realise it's hard.
There's very few things in here that are cheap and nasty.
I agree.
Yeah, and it's the same in the back here as well. This is all textured as well, which you don't always get when you come into the rear seats.
No, absolutely.
And I think what is also great about this interior is just its simplicity. So it's hot outside. Done. That's it. I don't have to dive into a menu on a touch screen and worry about whether it's going to glitch or not work. And the touchscreen itself is also great because of how simple it is. So the screen's big enough. It looks quite nice with the graphics that it has.
You've
and
also
look,
got some short buttons as well, and
physical buttons underneath.
shortcut buttons.
And you can also just relax and listen to
You can do.
typical
Well, we are in a forest here.
sounds of nature.
Should we put that on?
Yeah.
That is very relaxing.
I think let's just soak it up for a minute.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
What I have also noticed is that you appear to get leather seats. Are these standard?
Well, let me correct you there. These are artificial leather. They're also not standard. So if you go for the entry-level car, which is 2 trim, then you get some black cloth. This is GT line, one step up from that, you get this artificial leather.
Okay, but it's still pretty good value GT line trim,
And it
isn't
looks good, and the pattern's nice.
This is just a really nice interior.
What do I do if I'm a tall person and I want to sit far away from the steering wheel?
Well, you can just lean forward slightly.
Okay.
And,
Can you adjust the steering wheel?
Why would you want to do that? You can adjust this for height,
Okay.
which is great. But unfortunately, you still can't pull it out or push it in
That is a shame.
either. But none of these cars can do that.
That is true. It is one of the problems for some people
Yep.
with buying a car in this class is that there isn't any reach adjustment on the steering. I get on with it okay.
Same for me.
I don't. I have quite short arms, it would appear.
Okay. But something you've got to try before you buy.
Absolutely.
Let's see what the i10's like.
Okay, so we are in the i10, and a lot of the fundamentals in here are very similar to the Picanto. So you have the same basic arrangement for the air conditioning controls. Very easy to use, you just twist these dials here. And you've got a very similar infotainment system as well. So it's a touchscreen, it's quite quick to respond. It has a slightly different skin on it and some different graphics, but very similar to use. You've also got shortcut buttons. Rather than being underneath the screen, they are down the sides. So all of that is very good, very impressive.
But it is a bit dull in here. I mean, everywhere I look, it's just a different shade of black plastic.
It is. And I think it's important to point out this is an entry-level trim on the i10 versus a mid-spec Picanto, because of course this is a 1.2 litre engine versus the entry-level 1 litre. So we've got a higher spec to Picanto to keep the prices as close as possible.
But the interior of the Picanto in this GT line model is pretty similar to what you get on the entry-level trim.
Okay, well that is good to know.
It's nicer than this.
It is. And yeah, some of these plastics here I mentioned in the Picanto that unless you touch them, you don't know that they are hard.
But I can see here, that looks so shiny in the sunlight.
It's very obvious, especially these ones on the doors here. So yeah, it just feels a little bit more utilitarian inside, not at all premium.
And what's it like in the back for you, Doug?
Well, it's the same in the back here. You can see that these are pretty hard, nasty plastics, and it doesn't get better when you actually do touch them either. But space-wise, I mean, really this and the Picanto, it's remarkable how accommodating they are in the rear seats, given that they're really quite small on the road, aren't they?
They are.
And you also have, I have to admit, quite a lot of storage space. But a pet hate of mine is when car manufacturers put storage space in the interior and they don't line any of it with rubber. So you put your glasses in there or your phone, and the first corner you go around at speed, they fly out and you lose them forever. So that's not great. And I'm not sure what's going on here either.
Yeah, I think this rear cubby here, behind the parking brake lever, if I put anything in it, it's going to disappear
Forever.
into oblivion down there, and I'm never going to be able to fish it out. I think there's actually a piece of trim missing. So that's probably not supposed to be like that, but yeah, not ideal. Driving position though, very similar to the Picanto. That's good. You don't get reach adjustment on any of these cars for the steering wheel, as Doug mentioned earlier, but I've got some nice clear digital dials there, and I've also got quite a comfortable seat as well.
So ultimately, it's pretty functional, but it's just a little dull.
Absolutely.
Let's look at the 500.
Let's do it. So, in terms of outright interior quality, I don't think this is any better than your car, but just look at it. It's a much happier place to spend time.
Unless you're sat in the back, because there really is hardly any room back here. I've got to basically lie down in order to be comfortable for this segment.
Yeah, but you can just pretend to be a teenager again.
You look comfortable.
Well, I'd rather be in an i7, I think, than this, but
Yeah,
you know,
but looking
anyway.
forward and being positive, I think this is actually a really nice interior, considering it was designed nearly 20 years ago. So every 500 that you buy, even the base model, gets this body coloured fascia, which again I think looks really nice, especially in this orange. And I like a lot of the retro touches, such as the door handles, this gear knob, and even all the buttons are kind of, it's not actually chrome, but it looks like chrome as long as you don't touch it.
Chrome on plastic. Yeah, I agree. It's a cheery place to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the highest quality interior, but it puts a smile on your face.
And the same even goes for these seats. You know, I don't have leather, but the design on there has all been thought about. So from a purely design standpoint, it's very nice.
But I'll bet that infotainment system feels quite dated now, does it?
Yeah, that is a real weakness. Now, to be fair, I've been using Apple CarPlay, which is great because I can use my phone's apps to bypass the native software. But actually, the screen is not very clear. It's pretty muddy, as you can see. There's no physical shortcut buttons, and the icons are quite small. It's also just not that intuitive to use, and it's very slow. So I don't think really there's any positives to be said about that infotainment screen. However, I do get digital dials, and while those are not very configurable, they're very easy to read. So that's a big plus from me.
And what's the driving position like generally?
Driving position is okay, depending kind of on your body shape.
Well, you've got height adjustment there, haven't you?
Yeah, this is a bit misleading, and I knew you were going to bring this up. So on this model, you do get this lever, but it actually doesn't do anything to raise or lower the seat. All it does is it pitches the angle of the seat base to give you a little bit more support, but you're fixed in this fairly upright driving position.
That isn't ideal, is it?
No. And just like your cars, I can't adjust the wheel in and out. So again, I'm stuck with this very outright driving position with my arms kind of locked almost. So again, not great. And there's also not a lot of space for your feet. Now that's fine around town when you're always, you know, on the clutch and on the brake. But when you're on the motorway, I really don't have a lot of space for my left foot. So again, not that comfortable on a long journey.
So probably the worst driving position of the three,
I would say the worst driving position by far.
but the other two don't get this in the trims they're in, at least.
Yeah, that's true. So you get a lovely sunroof, but it doesn't open. That's a bit of a shame. However, Fiat does do a convertible version of this car. You can have a 500 seat if you want the wind in your hair. Overall, I would say that this car has a very nice interior to look at, but actually from a user-friendly standpoint, it's not brilliant.
Can I also point out there's some massive metal box underneath the passenger seat here, so that completely removes
Well,
any foot space.
That
I
is
might
just
have.
your fault for sitting on that side of the car. If you were sat behind me,
But what is
no
it?
problem.
Well, I can tell you that. It is actually a 12-volt battery, because this car, as we mentioned earlier, is a hybrid. And that 12-volt battery feeds the petrol engine with some power. Huge amounts of power. Makes this a very fast car.
And massively economical as well, I'm
Exactly. But no, that's what it is. It was obviously an afterthought. If this car was conceived as a hybrid, it probably wouldn't be there. But they're looking for a space to put a 12-volt
Hilarious.
battery, and under the passenger seat was deemed the best place.
Fair enough. Overall, though, it's the Picanto that is best inside up front. Do you agree?
I agree.
And then second place, ultimately it's probably the i10, right?
Yeah, I think if people will look at photographs of these cars, they would probably go for the 500. But when you get into them and start to interact, I think the i10, it just has the edge.
I agree. I think the i10 has an objectively better interior in terms of functionality, driving position.
Yeah.
But I can totally understand why someone might go into a showroom and look at this and fall in love and buy it.
Totally.
Right, let's get back on the road.
Let's do it. So, I have 69 horsepower at my disposal, which isn't a lot, but I'm hoping that they're rampant Italian horses so that I can at least beat Doug, who's in the least powerful car here.
The slight twist with this drag race is that, yes, we've got a straight bit of road, but there is also a bit of a hill.
Ready, and 3, 2, 1, go!
Come on!
Good start, here we go.
Come on! Come on! Come on!
I'm pulling Neil in, I'm pulling him in, come on!
Oh, I'm neck and neck with Will. Come on!
Is it going to have it in the bag?
Those Italian horses.
Oh no, they've got away now. Look how close it is between those two. The Fiat might have the i10.
Oh no, this is really close. It's going to be close. It's going to be close. It's going to be close. Across the line, I've gone for a gear
I
change.
think I've just won.
Will took it. Oh,
I've just won.
he always ends up in the fastest car. But I think the Fiat, being quite a few brake horsepower down on that i10, did quite well there.
So, Will, the internet is waiting. Tell us the drag race numbers that we have here.
Well, you've already seen the placings. The i10 finished first, closely followed by the 500 and the Picanto last. But the numbers. So, the i10 did 0 to 60 in 15.5 seconds, which is quite a time. Slower than the official figures, of course, but this was up a hill. And it did the quarter mile in 20.2 seconds. The Fiat 500, only slightly behind that, did the quarter mile in 20.3 seconds, so actually only a few hundredths
Blistering
behind.
performance.
And that did 0 to 60 in 16 seconds, and the Picanto, that did 0 to 60 in 16.9 seconds, and the quarter mile in 20.7 seconds.
There you go.
Some pretty tough times to beat that.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's be honest, straight line pace for these kinds of cars really doesn't matter at all, does it? There are
Not
lots of other things that are more important to factor in to picking a winner out of these three. So we'll start with ride comfort. And which is the best of these three in that department?
I'd say the i10 by a fair margin.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the i10 rides really nicely.
And it's the 500 that's probably the least comfortable of the three, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite brittle even around town. It's not somewhere where you want to spend a long period of time.
And when it comes to handling, it's another victory for the i10, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it's not a car that you're going to be amazed by how fun the handling is, but it's competent and actually quite pleasant to drive, so I think it is the best of these three cars.
And it's another third place finish for the 500.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite nimble around town. It has the smallest turning circle of all the cars, but you're right, when you get out onto a country road, it feels pretty vague. Ultimately, it just feels like a 20-year-old car.
And to be fair to the Picanto, it is much closer to the i10 in these areas than it is to the 500. But ultimately, the i10 is the most comfortable, it's the best to drive, it's also the most practical, and it's the quickest as well. The Picanto is the slowest, but it's also the most efficient. And we've got these fuel economy numbers we can dig into now. So we'll start with the town route, which we did earlier. 29 thrilling miles through London in stop-start traffic. And the trip computer was showing me that I achieved 42.6 miles per gallon in the Picanto. What did you get in the 500 now?
Well, considering that it's a hybrid, it only did 39.8. I was hoping for a little bit more than that, but not bad.
And the i10?
Well, again, according to the trip computer, 37.8 mpg, but obviously when you've got a much more powerful car, a very fast car, you wouldn't expect perhaps such spectacular fuel economy.
Well, of course, and trip computers can't always be trusted, but what we did was a proper brim to brim for the entire trip, so we do know that over the 100 miles that we covered over the 2 days, in the Picanto, I did, in real world driving conditions, achieve 52.6 miles per gallon, which compared to the 500?
48.8. So again, not amazing, but not bad.
It was better than the i10 though, that achieved 47.4 mpg.
Okay. Now, fuel economy, again, is just one thing to factor into long-term running costs, which are very, very important to look at for these kinds of cars at this end of the market. So, in terms of list price, we already established at the start, the 500 is the most expensive car here, isn't it? And it's quite close between the other two cars, although we do have a bit of a mishmash in terms of trim levels. We've got a range-topping Fiat 500, we got a more powerful i10 engine in a lower trim level, less powerful Picanto engine in a higher trim level. But essentially, the 500 is the most expensive, and it's pretty close between these two cars.
Yeah, and that's the same if you look at the running costs over 3 years. So even if you factor in depreciation, insurance costs, servicing costs, tax, and the fuel economy figures we got, you will find that the 500 is the most expensive car over 3 years of ownership. And actually, it's your car that is the cheapest, but only by a very small margin.
30 quid all.
It's not much, especially when it's factored in over 3 years. And considering the other advantages that the i10 has ultimately over the Picanto, then it's probably the Hyundai that you would pick as the winner out of those two. But lots of buyers will be owning these cars on a monthly PCP finance deal, won't they? So is the story different when we look at those numbers?
Yeah, that's a very good point. The story is quite different. So considering that my car is quite a bit more expensive to buy in terms of its list price, when you go down the PCP finance route, things look a lot better. So assuming you put £2,000 down, limit yourself to 10,000 miles a year, on a 3-year deal, you'll find that the 500 is £248 a month, which is only £1 more than your car and £12 more than your car. And of course, you don't have to go for the range-topping 500 either. The base car is fairly well equipped. You don't get some luxuries, but if you go for that car, it'll only cost you £209 a month. And that's because at the moment, Fiat is offering a £2,000 deposit contribution, whereas you guys only get £500.
Okay, that is interesting.
It is. Now, some people might be looking at this and seeing a Fiat 500 that costs more than £18,000 and wondering how we can possibly be calling it cheap. But the fact is that we're living in an era where new car prices are going up and up and up, and they have been crazily so for the last few years. And it is true that these three cars are among the cheapest new cars that you can buy. Even if looking at the list price, you might be a bit shocked by what you have to fork out for them. But clearly there are lots of positives for opting for these cars at this end of the market, not least how frugal they can be. But there are also some downsides when you're shopping at this budget end of the new car market, aren't there?
There are. We should probably talk about safety. So I think a lot of people who might be considering a small, relatively cheap car like one of these will be worried about how well they might protect themselves and also their family. And the reality is, look, if you were to have an accident with a much larger car, a Range Rover or something like that, you're not going to come off particularly well. The fact is that even if you took two cars with 5-star Euro NCAP safety ratings, a small car like one of these and a much larger car, a big SUV, then the smaller car would come off much worse if the two cars were to collide. None of these cars does have a Euro NCAP safety rating of 5 stars though. In fact, the Fiat 500 that was tested back in 2017 at a time when the tests were far less stringent than they are today, that only achieved 3 stars. It was so long ago actually that rating's expired now. The Kia Picanto, the pre-facelifted car, that achieved 4 stars back in 2017. But again, that rating's so old that it is no longer valid. So the only car here with a current Euro NCAP safety rating is the i10. That was from back in 2020, and still it was only 3 stars, which isn't particularly great. There were some issues around chest protection for the driver that the tests identified, and also chest protection for a child sitting in the back. So not particularly great, and clearly safety is not a strength of any of these cars here. And that might worry you more if you plan to do lots of fast A-road and motorway driving than if you do most of your driving around town.
Absolutely.
Although, I should mention that if you do a lot of your driving around town, it's not brilliant that the Fiat 500, even in its range-topping trim, doesn't get automatic emergency braking or lane keep assist, which is pretty rare now in 2024.
That is.
So clearly, safety is very, very disappointing. But if we put that to one side, and if this is your budget for a new car, then in this test we've shown that actually you've got a decent choice and you can end up with something that's comfortable, good to drive, pretty nice inside and surprisingly practical as well. And of the three that we have here, it's the i10 that's the winner.
It is. Only by a small margin, I'd say, over the Picanto, but it is overall the best car here.
And the Fiat 500 is the worst.
Yeah, I mean, subjectively, I quite like the 500. It has what you might call character, but it really is starting to feel its age, and objectively, it's just not that great a car.
Okay, well, there you go. Thanks very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there and subscribe to our channel as well while you're at it. And if you want a great deal on any of these cars or any other new car around, or if you want to read our written review of every new and used car on the market, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.